I always believed that home wasn't just a place. It was a feeling, a piece of your soul carved into walls, doors, and wooden floors that held your childhood footsteps. For as long as I could remember, I had been obsessed with the house I grew up in. It wasn't grand or extravagant, but it was perfect in a way only childhood memories can make things feel. Every morning, I'd wake up to the scent of my mother's coffee brewing downstairs, the distant sound of my father's voice as he spoke on the phone about work, and the muffled hum of my brother's cartoons playing on the TV. That house was my sanctuary, the place where I had my first sleepover, where I spent countless hours dreaming about the future, and where I had promised myself over and over again that one day when I was older it would be mine. My parents always knew this. They knew how much that house meant to me. I had told them 1,000 times that I wanted to buy it from them, that no matter how much it cost, I would work for it. They had smiled, nodded, and said, "Of course, sweetheart. When the time comes." But the time came and they betrayed me. I found out through a casual conversation. Nothing dramatic, no heartfelt discussion. My mother simply mentioned over dinner one night that they had decided to sign the house over to my brother. My brother, who had never once expressed interest in it, who had never spent nights dreaming of decorating it, who had never worked half as hard as I had to make something of himself. I thought it was a joke at first. "Wait, what?" I had laughed, confused. "You're giving the house to Adam." My mother had nodded, completely unaware that she was shattering me in real time. "Well, yes, he needs it. You're doing fine, honey. You've got a good job and you'll build something for yourself. But Adam, you know how he is. He needs a little help. He needs a little help." As if I hadn't spent my entire life working twice as hard to get half the recognition. As if I hadn't struggled through college, balancing 2 part-time jobs while Adam had floated through life, dropping out of one thing after another, always landing softly because someone was always there to catch him. That someone was always me. When he got into trouble, I bailed him out. When he needed money, I sent it without question. When he had no idea what to do with his life, I helped him make a plan. And yet, when it came down to it, I was the one left empty-handed. "You promised me," I whispered, my throat tightening. "You said." "We thought you'd understand," my father cut in, his voice firm. "You're independent. You don't need this. Adam does." And just like that, years of love, of effort, of sacrifice, collapsed into nothing. I left that dinner table feeling like a ghost, a presence they barely noticed. No matter what I had done, no matter how much I had tried, I would never be the child they prioritized. I was nothing but an afterthought. But that night something shifted in me. The heartbreak was real, but so was something else, something sharper, heavier. It wasn't just anger. It was purpose. If they thought I didn't need that house, if they thought I wasn't worthy of the home I had spent my life loving, then I would show them exactly what I was capable of. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to build something so extraordinary, so undeniably perfect, that they wouldn't be able to ignore me anymore. I was going to create a home that would make them regret every single choice they had ever made. I left my parents' house that night with a pit in my stomach and a fire in my chest. The betrayal sat heavy on my shoulders, but alongside the pain, there was something else, something raw and unrelenting. It was the need to prove them wrong. They thought I didn't need the house. They thought I was fine on my own. Then fine. I would build something that would make them realize they had underestimated me. At first, I didn't know where to begin. My savings were enough to put a down payment on something modest. But that wasn't enough. I didn't just want a house. I wanted a home that would make a statement. Something bigger, bolder, more beautiful than the one they had given away like it was a hand-me-down sweater. But I wasn't rich. I didn't have the luxury of family money or a financial safety net like my brother did. All I had was my determination, and that meant I had to be smart. I spent weeks researching. I read everything I could about home building, real estate investments, and architectural designs. I pored over blueprints, taught myself about construction costs, and ran through 100 different scenarios. I had no background in property development, but that didn't matter. If there was one thing I had learned in life, it was that hard work could make up for anything. I found a piece of land on the outskirts of town, a quiet, sloping property with a stunning view of the valley. It was nothing but dirt and rocks at first, but in my mind I saw it clearly. I envisioned glass walls that let in golden morning light, open spaces that breathed, and details that made it feel alive. It wasn't just a house I was building, it was a masterpiece. The first hurdle was money. My savings weren't enough to cover the cost of land and construction, so I had to be strategic. I took out a loan, negotiated hard with contractors, and found ways to cut costs without sacrificing quality. I worked late nights, took on extra projects at work, and funneled every cent I made into the build. It was exhausting, and there were nights I doubted myself. Nights when the numbers didn't add up, when permits were delayed, when bad weather ruined my timeline. There were moments I felt small, insignificant, like maybe my parents had been right all along. But every setback only made me push harder. When I couldn't afford top-tier architects, I learned how to design layouts myself. When labor costs skyrocketed, I showed up at the site and helped with the work. I learned how to sand wood, mix cement, and install fixtures. I bruised my hands, wrecked my nails, and poured my soul into every inch of that home. It wasn't just about proving my parents wrong anymore. It was about proving something to myself. Months passed. Seasons changed. My bank account dipped lower than I ever thought I'd allow it to, but I kept going. I saw something no one else did. And then, one day it started to take shape. The frame went up first. Tall, solid, standing against the sky like a declaration. Then came the walls, the floors, the ceilings. Bit by bit, it transformed from an empty lot to something that felt real. The day the glass windows were installed, I stood inside, watching the sun dip over the valley, and I felt it for the first time, home. But I didn't stop there. I wasn't just building a house. I was crafting a legacy. I added things I had only dreamed of. High ceilings, a sprawling open kitchen, a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves. I created a space that felt like it had been plucked from the pages of a luxury design magazine. Place that made you stop and stare. A home so magnificent, so undeniably breathtaking that no one could ignore it. Including my parents. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same parents who had dismissed my dreams, who had so easily given away the house I loved, were now hearing whispers about what I was building. Word traveled fast in our small town, and soon people started asking questions. Did you hear about what she's building? It's supposed to be incredible. She's doing it all on her own. The first time my mother asked about it, her voice was hesitant. How's that little project of yours going? She asked over the phone one day, as if it were a hobby, as if I hadn't poured every ounce of my energy into it. I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. It's not a project, Mom. It's my home. She hummed in response, but I could hear it. The curiosity, the tiny flicker of doubt creeping into her voice. But let them wonder. By the time the house was nearly finished, people were openly talking about it. The contractor I had hired, who had initially doubted whether I'd see the project through, started using my build as an example for future clients. My realtor said it was one of the most stunning homes she had ever seen. The whispers grew louder, and soon even my father, stoic, dismissive, always so certain, began to ask questions. Are you really building something that impressive? He asked one evening when I stopped by to pick up some old things I had left at their place. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Why don't you come and see for yourself?" He hesitated, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't. But curiosity is a powerful thing. And I had built something impossible to ignore. The night before the unveiling, I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by the very thing I had built from the ground up. The glass walls stretched high above me, framing the endless sky, while the smooth oak floors beneath my feet felt warm and solid, like they belonged to me and no one else. It had taken me years of sacrifice, of working through exhaustion, of breaking down walls both literally and figuratively. But here I was. I had done it. I wasn't just standing in a house. I was standing in proof. Proof that I had never needed anyone's permission to succeed. Proof that I was never the weak, disposable daughter they had treated me as. Proof that I could build something greater than what they had taken from me. The invitations had been sent weeks ago. I didn't phrase them as an invitation to a housewarming party. That felt too small for what I wanted this night to be. No, I called it a grand unveiling. The kind of event that made people curious, uneasy, and desperate to be included. I invited friends, colleagues, old acquaintances, and of course my family. At first, I wasn't sure if my parents would come. My mother had sounded hesitant on the phone when I casually mentioned the date. My father had remained silent. And my brother? Well, Adam had always been too caught up in his own world to care much about mine. But something told me that even he wouldn't be able to resist coming to see what all the whispers had been about. And I was right. The night of the unveiling, guests arrived in waves. I watched from the second-floor balcony as dozens of people stepped through my doors, wide-eyed and speechless. Some of them I had grown up with, others were business contacts, and some were people who had once doubted me. Contractors, realtors, even old teachers who had never imagined I'd amount to much. Then, right as the party was in full swing, I saw them. My parents walked in together, their expressions unreadable. My father was dressed in his usual button-up and slacks, a slight crease forming between his brows as he looked around, taking in the sheer grandeur of my home. My mother, dressed in a soft beige dress, clutched her purse tightly, her eyes darting from the massive floor-to-ceiling windows to the sleek, modern chandeliers that hung from the vaulted ceiling. Then came Adam. He arrived late, as he always did, carrying himself with that same careless arrogance he always had. But when he stepped inside, something shifted. His easy confidence flickered for just a moment, long enough for me to catch it. Because the house I had built wasn't just bigger than the one he had been handed, it was better in every possible way. I let them wander. I let them see what I had created. I let them overhear people whispering things like, "I can't believe she built this on her own. This is the most beautiful house I've ever seen. Her parents must be so proud." But the best part, I made sure they knew the truth. When my father finally approached me, drink in hand, he cleared his throat before speaking. "This is quite the house," he admitted, looking around. Smiled. "Yes, it is." His gaze flickered downward, as if he was trying to figure out what to say next. I let the silence stretch. I wanted him to feel every ounce of discomfort I had felt that night when he and my mother had casually given away my dream. My mother was next. She placed a careful hand on my arm, her voice softer than usual. "Sweetheart, we had no idea you were doing all this." I tilted my head. "Didn't you?" She hesitated, and in that moment I saw it. The regret, the realization, the silent, unspoken acknowledgement that they had misjudged me, that they had underestimated me. And then came Adam. He approached with a forced smile, but I saw the tightness in his jaw, the way his fingers twitched at his side. "Nice place," he said, but there was no warmth in his voice. I let my gaze roam over him. My brother, the golden child, the one who had always been handed everything. And yet, standing here in my home, he looked small. "It is," I said simply. "And you know what the best part is?" He raised an eyebrow. "What?" I leaned in just slightly, lowering my voice so that only he could hear me. "I built it without anyone's help." For the first time in his life, Adam had no comeback. The party went on late into the night. Guests continued to praise my home, marveling at the craftsmanship, the vision, the sheer effort that had gone into creating something so extraordinary. My parents lingered for hours longer than I expected them to, as if they couldn't bring themselves to leave. And when they finally did, my mother hugged me tighter than she had in years. My father patted my shoulder and muttered something about how I had done well for myself. And Adam, he walked out in silence. That night, as the last guest left, I stood on my balcony, looking down at the home I had built. The home that wasn't just a house, it was proof. Proof that I didn't need anyone's validation. Proof that I had never needed their permission to succeed. I didn't build this home for them, but I made damn sure they would never forget it. And as I watched their car disappear down my long private driveway, I smiled, because for the first time in my life I had won.